Well, Mick Dennis has joined us in the studio to talk through the papers, and Mick, John Terry making most of the papers today, pretty much all of them, and you're starting off with your paper, the Daily Express.
Because the two issues, clearly, I mean, there was a lot of fantastic football last night. I make no apologies for leading on this, because there are developments overnight, I think, in the way it's been reported. The two stories you're seeing there, on the left, Graham Taylor talking about how the FA operates, and on the right, my colleague John Dillon talking about the perfect storm that's engulfing the game. John deals with what he thinks John Terry should do next, so let's think about that and talk about that. England have a friendly against Holland on February the 29th, and a lot is said whenever we debate this about innocent until proved guilty, and let me just talk about that very quickly. The presumption of innocence comes from the way we conduct court cases in this country, where the onus of proof is on the prosecution. So if I'm accused of something, I don't have to say anything. The prosecution have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that I did it. But that doesn't mean I can go about my normal life with no let or hindrance while something is hanging over me. If we thought that, we wouldn't put suspected murderers we wouldn't remand them in prison. It's just a nonsense to assume that the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, carries with it the expectation of a normal life. It doesn't. So I agree really with John Dillon and what he says here about England. He says that John Terry should make the issue simple for the FA by saying, "I'll take one for the team." He says this, John Dillon. As the man who famously got his second chance at the England captaincy, the office he regards as the highest in the sporting land, it would be the least he could do in return. He goes on to say a bit more in there about it being help from common sense. He says this: it would certainly be a serious act of leadership and experience to stand aside and divert the flak away from the camp at the beginning of such a crucial year for the side. I think as well it would send a message to the world. There's a danger with both Suarez and John Terry. There have been accusations that the FA is trying to send a message to Sepp Blatter, and I'm going to talk about Graham Taylor looking at the Suarez case in a minute, and I don't think that is the case. I don't think there's any suggestion that is the case, but the other side of that coin is we can't mock Sepp Blatter when he says that, oh, racist taunts, you should just shake hands at the end of a match. When he says something as crass as that, we can't mock that unless we take these allegations immensely seriously, because they are serious. Allegations, though they are not proven. Let me deal with Graham Taylor, because the point of having columnists from inside the game is that they can bring something to the table that people like me can't. Graham Taylor has sat on FA tribunals, and he talks about that setup, and he is offended by the suggestion, which came from Liverpool, that this was part of some witch hunt inspired from within the FA. He talks about cases that he's sat on, and he says this: but there was no outside interference, no nudge, nudge, wink, wink from FA officials leading me down a certain route. I was asked for my decision, and I gave it. I know Paul Golding, who was the independent QC who led the Suarez Evra case, and he is a good man. I've sat alongside him on cases. There is no chance he or the other panel members have been manipulated in any way to fall into line with an anti-Liverpool football club and anti-Suarez bias. That is just wrong. And he says, I have no reason to defend the FA. So I want to move on to how Liverpool have responded to these charges against their player. And let's have a look at Back of the Sun, who carried pictures of them warming up last night, and that little inset picture of Kenny Dalglish in a T-shirt. Liverpool went to the trouble of manufacturing and printing Suarez T-shirts last night. I believe that by wearing them, I believe that they were contemptuous of the proceedings, belligerently provocative, and I think they have damaged the cause of anti-racism in the game. I think that they will and should be in trouble for wearing those T-shirts, because my understanding is that there are rules about the T-shirts you wear on a football pitch. I think they have to be approved in advance, and they should not be personal or political slogans. They're normally for charities. And I'm going to deal with some others comment on this as well, and I'll give them their voice in a minute. But I was incredibly disappointed that Liverpool's response to the charge was to suggest that it had been decided on without hearing the issues. That's what they said. That their response was, it seemed to us they wanted to charge him even before they'd spoken to him. It's this tribal, blinkered response. He's one of ours, and so we must defend him. Kenny Dalglish using the trite, "We won't let him walk alone," which it's something to use that after Hillsborough, but to use it when someone has been accused of something as serious as this, you don't have to say, well, we think he did it. You can make a bold statement saying the process is ongoing and we will support him through that process. But the fact is, at the moment, Luis Suarez has been found guilty of a very, very serious offence, and we need to understand that it's a serious offence. It's not just a football matter, and so it shouldn't provoke just a football response. And by doing what they did, Liverpool, by taking such a tribal, insular, he's our man, we defend him come what may attitude, they invited the tribalism of others. So yesterday the message boards and phone-ins were full of Liverpool versus Manchester United. This is not about Liverpool versus Manchester United. This is about someone admitting to a tribunal that he used a word and using the defence of ignorance. It isn't a defence, in my view. That issue is yet to be decided. But it wasn't about Manchester United and Liverpool fans and Manchester United fans and the rest of us should always be less tribal. So let me move on to others who've made that point. Matt Lawton in the Daily Mail, headline, "Loyalty must not be blind." And I'm going to read what Matt says about the issue I've just talked about. He says, "Players expect their managers to stand by them, and supporters expect to see that kind of loyalty too. It is on such foundations that success is often built at a football club. It is how a manager creates a spirit and a unity within his squad. And let's not forget that these extremely important players for their clubs, Suarez is Liverpool's best player this season, Terry is Chelsea's captain. But when the issue is something as serious as racism, our football clubs also need to remember that they have a responsibility to the society in which we all live, one that right-minded people want to see rid of racial prejudice." And Jim Lawton, no relation, in The Independent, as tribalism of fans who can't see the harm done. He says this, "The trouble is not so much the threat of lingering prejudice, as absurdly in such a cosmopolitan game, as disturbing indications that a majority of football followers in this country see the issue not as a rare opportunity to exhibit, I beg your pardon, not as a rare unifying force, but another opportunity to exhibit the most raw and one-eyed tribalism." We see this every time I go to a football match. I've been to 2 matches to watch Norwich at Everton and Wolves in the last few days, and people standing around me see things through the prism of their own bias, and I understand that. So you see a foul and you are convinced that when it's your player he didn't do it, and when it's their player he did do it. But these are not issues of grabbing shirts or tripping someone. These are issues that go to the heart of how we want to shape the way we live in this country. And such a tribal response is immensely disappointing. Is there time for any football?
There isn't, I'm afraid,
okay.
Nick, but I think you've covered it, and I've no doubt a huge response to that throughout the day, but thank you very much. Fascinating stuff.
Much to say. I'm going to move on because there's a topic I want to talk about. It's Suarez. And I'm going to look at 2 papers who've done, I think, a fantastic job. The Telegraph have a spread. We do 2 pages in Newcastle, we call it a spread. In fact, your graphics people have only given me the one headline. There are 2 other stories on that page. That's Chris Bascom talking about that mealy-mouthed apology that you're dealing with. The other stories on that page, on the 2 pages, are Chris also talking about Liverpool demanding reform of the FA process that led to the strikers' ban. They're going. It's like they're like guilty people in a court being dragged down screaming their innocence. And Jim White also a comment on that page. And I want to read you Jim White, although it's not in your graphic, if I may. So Jim White using irony, which is always difficult because sometimes your readers don't understand that it's irony. But he says this: according to the club, Suarez has done nothing wrong. The fault in the incident lies with his duplicitous accuser, with the incompetent match officials, with the system of justice that spitefully victimised him. And this is Liverpool's attitude. They continue to say, well, we're reluctantly accepting the punishment, and he was convicted on probability and on the word of one man. So let me deal quickly with those accusations. Suarez was not convicted on the evidence of one man. Suarez was convicted because Liverpool's evidence itself was found to be completely incredible. Two Liverpool witnesses changed their evidence when they realised that it contradicted what Suarez was saying. Suarez himself continually changed his tune, in particular in relation to one incident, the pinching of skin, which was contradicted by video evidence. And three independent people came to a conclusion on the balance of probability. Let me talk about that quickly. In a criminal court, you have to be found guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. But in order to establish that level of proof, it requires witnesses to give evidence on oath and them to be at the pain of punishment of perjury if they lie on oath. If that's what Liverpool want, they want people to be punished for perjury if they lie on oath, then they need to read the 115-page judgment very carefully, because they would put themselves in peril. The balance of probability is not a glib judgment made by people saying, oh, I think it's probably that. It is a careful weighing of the evidence and coming to a conclusion that neutral assessment would say, this is the case we prove. The balance of probability is a standard of proof that is sufficient in every civil court in this country. Mike, if I sue you for something, then the court would take the balance of probability. It doesn't mean it's just probable. Sure. It's a standard of proof. So Liverpool have been convicted, and yet, as I say, they go down screaming and shouting. Let me look at The Guardian, who also have done a fantastic job on this, a spread. I hope, again, I'm sorry, perhaps I didn't explain myself fully to your graphics department. They've given one story there by Richard Williams, which is itself fantastic, but there's also a piece on this two-page spread by Lord Herman Ouseley, who's a former head of the Commission for Racial Equality. Richard Williams, fine writer, and let me say there are no columnists or commentators at all who are sympathetic to Liverpool today. None, not one. And that's not because of some anti-Merseyside conspiracy. Let me say that for nearly 40 years I've been going to Anfield professionally, and you always enjoy going there because the crowd is so knowledgeable. They have a reputation for being fair-minded. They cheer opposition goalkeepers. They appreciate good football. And yet throughout this episode, led, I have to say, by their manager and others at the club, they have been tribal and blinkered throughout, and they've diminished a great club. Let me read what Lord Ouseley says. He says this: in any other sector, if someone makes a claim of racially motivated or abusive behaviour, an employer has to investigate if they are competent, because this may be damaging to the business. One of the claims, one of the worrying things is that from the very first moment, Liverpool adopted a defensive stance. From the very first moment at the match, when the fourth official went to their dressing room and said, Kenny, we'd like to talk to you. And Dalglish refused to take Evra with him, or declined to take Evra with him. And Lord Ouseley says this: clubs in these cases don't, in other words, don't seem to conduct a proper investigation. And when it's a high-profile incident involving a big name player, they want to say unequivocally, we defend our players. And he goes on to say this: Liverpool have been particularly hypocritical. You can't, on the one hand, wear a kick-it-out T-shirt in a week of campaigning against racism when this is also happening. And the obvious conclusion you draw there is the T-shirts they wore. I think this has been a difficult week for this country, England, about racial prejudice. I draw no parallels at all with the Lawrence case at all. But we need to understand how serious the issue is, and I think that from the start, Liverpool's tribal response has done themselves and a great club a great disservice.
OK, Mick, thank you very much. Fascinating stuff.